Stefan Sagmeister is the author of 6 books and honestly one of the most influential designers in the world. I couldn't believe it. He's won multiple Grammy Awards for his designs because he's designed album covers for people like Jay-Z and David Byrne, the Rolling Stones. But he's a writer, and what does he write about? Well, design, beauty, how to find good ideas. And you'll notice when you pick up one of his books that the form, the style, the vibe, the typography is every bit as important as the content. This is really about design, beauty, and why our world looks the way it does. And this conversation starts with a strategy for finding good ideas. Tell me about this Edward de Bono method of when you're starting to think of some new idea and you're looking for a venturing off point, you start off with a very random point of departure.
Yeah. Well, let's say I have to design a glass.
Yeah.
And my usual way or a normal way would be is, okay, I look at the existing glasses. I try them out. I see what everybody else has done. I look at the history of glasses. And starting with that, I probably would design a glass that's very similar to the existing glasses. Now, if I want to design a glass that's new, my chance of designing something new are better if I don't start with a glass, but with something random. Let's say I start designing with your sock because I just see them.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then we already have, do we have fabric around the glass? Do we have something that is maybe elastic? Is there a possibility for a drinking container that's actually elastic? Is there something that could be nice that is hard here, but can we make something that is hard here but soft here? So when I put it down, it doesn't make the noise, but it kind of stands, and it could stand in all things. Not even bad. It took me 10 seconds.
That was pretty good.
And I think we could possibly prototype this specifically now, where we can injection mold different materials together so that we have a hard thing up here and a soft more, let's say if we do it out of some sort of artificial material, this could be injection molded so that this thing is much, much, much more rubbery, and this thing is super, super hard, much more plasticky, so that when we put it down, it can stand in all directions. Maybe for camping, this could be a very nice thing. So specifically, if you put it down on an uneven ground, like, on grassy or there's stones, that this just takes on the form.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting somewhere.
Totally.
Would have never thought it if I wouldn't have started with your sock. Never.
That's a good answer.
And of course, de Bono explains why this works, because our brain is lazy and it's very difficult for the brain. It's very energy heavy for the brain to think. So it doesn't want to think. So when we're just looking at other glasses, those are the synapses that it already has a connection, doesn't have to make a new one. When I force it to start with your sock, it has to make new connections. Now suddenly it has to think. It cannot just go. At the end, we'll wind up as a glass. The end result, the end ways, but I forced the brain to go through some other things and form a new synapses or a semi-new synapses. And that's, of course, also the reason why so many designers constantly repeat themselves, because that's the strongest connection between the synapses. It's like when they try to do something new, they're doing something that they did 2 years ago, because that synapses in their brain is already connected.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you is that you've built such a coherent, cohesive worldview, and I feel like a lot of that has been born out of your practice of writing diaries.
You are correct.
Yeah.
I started writing diaries, as many young people do, with like 10 or 12. And I think I found them really to be helpful, strangely, once I switched to doing them on the computer. Because my handwriting was so sloppy, specifically in the most interesting times when I'm doing really badly or doing really well, that I could never read it again. So it was never something that I could recheck. I found the rechecking super interesting because, sometimes there is a situation where I wanted to change something in my life 8 years ago, and I still haven't changed it. And I'm like, wow, I already wanted to do something about this 8 years ago, and I'm still suffering on this particular issue. So, and then I think as design was more close to my heart, the diary writing by itself really influenced the design. Then in the design world, the diary started to impact what we were doing significantly. There was a time after the first sabbatical where we got clients in the studio that had open briefs, meaning there was a client in France, a billboard company, they had billboards and they said, do something. Yeah, whatever. So I could have, take a photo of this water glass, and they actually would have run it. It literally was open. And this turned out to be super difficult for me because I was not used to work that way. Not
enough constraints.
Yeah, with zero restraints.
Huh.
And when it came to what should we do, I went back into the diary and there was a list that said things I've learned in my life so far.
Oh, wow.
And it had like 15 things on it. And I thought, well, I'll pick one of those and I'll make very complicated typography out of it, because at least I know, because I wrote it for myself in the diary, I know this to be true for me.
So tell me about the process of writing the diary, because you have such refined views about many of the core things that would go through a designer's head about beauty, about utility, about function, about the world that we live in. And the context here is when you go on your website, there's a whole answers page, and there's probably answers to 100 different questions that you've really thought through. And I'm very curious about the process of how you arrived at such clean thinking, because I know that clean thinking always has a messy process that leads up to it.
Sometimes in the design world, but very heavily in the art world, there is this notion of speaking in tongues, meaning in outspeak.
Totally.
It's meaning I sometimes make, I take the pictures. It's of the entry text in an exhibition.
Yeah. Academia is the same way.
It's so ridiculous. I mean, I probably have 100 picture of ... is among the most important artists working today.
Right.
That's the first sentence. And then it goes on, and I'm now versed well enough in outspeak that I can translate it. Mm-hmm. And we have an exhibition going on right now at a museum called MAS in Mexico. And the entry text is in outspeak. And is crossed out, and then in handwriting is the same text in like that. 3 sentences. It's exactly the same content.
Yeah.
Here it's 15 sentences in outspeak, and here it's in 4 sentences in very clear speak. And I can tell you, for example, in the beauty show, I worked my ass off to make in the exhibition on beauty, I worked my ass off to make the text as short and as precise as possible, because I know if you're standing in a museum, you don't want to read 15 sentences. Right. You might do 2.
Right.
And you want to get them immediately, because there is so much stuff in museums that are not gettable, or where people kind of feel stupid, which I think is a terrible thing to do to a person. In any way, but the result was that I should have kept 1 or 2 in outspeak. I later on heard an interview of an astronomer, and he said he worked so hard to make his first book very transparent. And then some people, specifically colleagues, thought that it was for children. So now he always includes at least 1 chapter that's quite opaque, so that people appreciate the clarity more.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you've have a keen understanding of is how typography can enhance content. And when I look through your work, oh my goodness, it's like a zoo of typography. It's just all these different forms from, oh my goodness, I didn't know that style exists, that shape existed. And it's not just, most people think of typography of you're going to go on, you're going to look at 74,000 different fonts, and then you're going to choose one. A lot of your typography is stuff that you literally hand drew and created yourself. And I'm curious to hear, and I'm sorry for how broad this is, but I don't have a better way to ask the question. I'm curious to hear about how you think of the relationship between the form of the type and the content of it.
Well, I think early on, or I would say I came of age and I became a designer when modernism was maybe 60, 70 years old, let's say starting at 1900, 1910, and then going on. And so by that point, it has sort of become the dialect of the corporate world.
Sure.
And with that unbelievably boring and machine-made and cold and not really something that I felt was good in communicating anything. So very early in the studio, we tried to make things very obviously human-made. Right. From an idea that if you call a company and you have, this is commercial work now that we're talking. So if you call a company and you're getting an answering machine, it's just not as nice as if you get a human being.
Of course.
And I thought the same would be true online and in print. If you're making something that's very clearly has been made by a human, it's just gonna be already a little bit more interesting than if it's something like almost all work that came out of modernism that in 1910 was very proud to be machine made. This was sort of the idea like, oh, it's a sitting machine. It's a place, it's a machine for living. It's, all of, it's all of that stuff, which 1910 was super interesting because you had to get rid of all that crap from the 19th century, all of that ornamental bullshit.
Thinking of the Bauhaus, yeah.
So, but by the 1980s, when I came of age, this was super boring. This has run its course. This was like, and you still had the most conservative of designers and architects clinging to that crap. My view is out of pure laziness because they all thought functionality, that's where it's at. But functionality is so unbelievably easy. If I have to set a typography so that it's good, well readable. Easy. I mean, it's like I can do thousands of it in an afternoon. Yeah. It's super easy once you know the rules. I mean, give me a break. And the same is true for a chair. I mean, if I have to design a chair that all it has to be is functional, meaning like reasonably comfortable, I can do 50 of them in an afternoon. It's like, it's nothing. Because you know the ideal sitting height and the ideal angles, and you know the materials, and then that's that. But if you need to design a chair that is functional, but also beautiful, and then let's put also on, make sense in 2025. This is one of the biggest design problems in the world, because now suddenly you're fighting 5,000 years of chair history. Right. And this is a completely different deal. And all these lazy functionalists just say, well, all I need to do is make it, ergonomically fine. Yeah, that's, it's just stupidity and laziness.
Well, a lot of what you did with typography was to actually make things by hand. And it got me thinking, I don't know why. It does take some skill, but it would be really interesting for authors to think about designing their book covers by hand. It's just not something that people do. I have a friend in town, he runs a restaurant called Jeans, and he just designed the logo by just doing a bunch of handwritten drawings, and then he took the handwriting and then put that into the computer. And to say that he designed his own fonts is way overstating the case, but he was able to make that digital. And in this world, especially with AI, geez, where things are going to become more of that sort of machine, computerized, synthetic, whatever it is, it just seems like having these strategies to communicate, hey, this is handmade, this was made with care by a human being, is an important thing to consider.
And I think it goes beyond the form. Let's say, there was a time when handwriting became so ubiquitous that, you had IBM ads being in Krixel Kraxel headlines. I think the form is one thing, but then also the content, like the way you communicate, the way you say, or the way you design the book cover, can be that clearly this is a crafted piece. That could go all the way, which, is possible, that there really is something handmade on the cover, which is possible if you figure out the system and how to get that done. Ultimately, I think in all of this, in this entire world, be it the logo for your friend's restaurant or the book cover, is we feel as viewers, if something has been done with love and care.
Yes.
Then we are quite generous, meaning like I've recently stayed at a hotel in Milano in Italy, which was really not my style. It was kitschy, it had butterflies, it was really not my thing. But I felt pretty comfortable there anyway. Probably wouldn't if I would stay there a month, but for a weekend it was totally fine.
Right.
Because the person who put this together, the organization who put this hotel together, they did it with love and care. There was clearly, they felt that this was something that was beautiful.
Yes.
And that was good. That was fine, good enough for me, even though I would never decorate my place in that way. But I think we all don't go on holiday in the places where you have discount furniture stores, gas stations, and fast food places. You very rarely see a hotel in those places. You might see a motel because there's also a factory there that needs something, but you very rarely see a hotel there because we go there if we need our cars gassed up or we need cheap furniture, but we will not want to stay longer out of our free will there. And the reason is because these places have been created without love and care.
Yeah.
Somebody needed a discount furniture store. Well, they said, let's put a box there, put our logo on it, and that's good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been created for convenience and efficiency and utility without any regard for the aesthetics. And even deeper, there's a kind of, one of the questions that you answer on your page is basically to the effect of, does beauty matter? Mm-hmm. And you basically say, of course it does. People feel better. They feel different in beautiful places. But it's this weird modern moment that we're in right now where we've come to doubt that very obvious and intuitive truth.
I would say it goes even beyond that. They feel better and they behave better.
Oh, really?
Yes. And, meaning we are now on 26th Street, a couple of blocks away from the High Line.
Yeah.
If you look at the High Line, you almost never see a piece of paper, a cup thrown away on the High Line. Basically never.
True.
You leave the High Line, you go into the meatpacking district, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In the gutter, it's all over the place. I can tell you.
I'll tell you this, when I was in college, I went to a beautiful school called Elon University, and you wouldn't dare litter if you were walking. Like if you littered and someone saw that you threw down a Tootsie Roll wrapper or something like that, you would get the eyes of Sauron on you from all the other students. And there was just a self-policing that was embedded in the culture because of how beautiful it was.
Yeah. That's I can tell you that if I'm at a mall here and I'm in a similar mall in Europe, I would say people behave very similarly. If I'm at an airport here and at an airport in Europe, people behave much better in Europe. And a reason is the shitty architecture.
Yeah.
If I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
Even if you, meaning there should have been a study, and I'm sure they didn't, but I would have loved to see a study of aggressive behavior at LaGuardia 5 years ago and now. I bet you anything that people calmed down. Anything.
After the remodel.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Same thing with Grand Central and Penn Station. I thought it was so interesting what you said about how the average photo at Penn Station had a negative vibe to it, whereas the average photo at Grand Central had a positive one.
Well, on average, that it was a institute in Boston did a very. It's actually live. You can look at it all the time. Did the big study on this Twitter or X now, that basically is geographically based, and they can measure how many. They can measure if a tweet is positive or negative.
The sentiment.
Yeah. And basically, and then color the map of Manhattan in green when it's more positive than negative, and red when it's more negative than positive. And Grand Central is always green 24 hours a day, and Penn Station is always red 24 hours a day.
Tell me about how you went from listening to the emotional tenor of a song to translating that into visuals. I mean, you're doing this for Brian Eno, David Byrne, Talking Heads, the Rolling Stones. How did you go about that process?
Well, I think you basically already mentioned it. That was the interesting part. You're picking something. I mean, if I go a second back, we usually were asked by the band to design the cover while they were in the studio.
Okay.
And so I would go to the studio. They would, depending on how famous the band is, they would give me 10 songs, half finished, not finished, when it became to bigger people like Jay-Z or the Stones, they wouldn't give you the songs. You had to listen to them while you were there because they were afraid of leaks and things like that. But in general, you listen to the songs. Almost always we could get some songs. And we played that in the studio and tried to talk to the band only about why they're making a new album, where does it come from, what they think it is about, and not about the cover at all. Because I felt that that translation of that sort of emotion in the music into that we love the fact that music by design is not visual. Right. And translating that into a visual is still, I think, a super interesting endeavor.
Yeah.
And that was the job, translating this emotion. And in some cases, if the band had a lot of history, like the Stones or so, that whole brouhaha of information and baggage into something that would work. And then, of course, also listen to what the band thought about in general. Like in the case of the Stones, it was very commercially oriented. Like Mick Jagger wanted something that looked good embroidered on a baseball cap. Right. Because the Stones actually make more money with merch than they do with the music.
Right. Is there a story from one of those album covers that really stands out to you?
Well, if we stick, I mean, there's many stories, obviously.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If we stick with the Stones one, I think one of my favorite moments there was when I met them first in Los Angeles. This was just Mick Jagger and Charlie Watts. And I asked Jagger what his favorite Stones covers would be. He said, Exile on Main Street, Some Girls, and Sticky Fingers. Okay. And I said, well, that's fantastic. These are my favorite 3 Stones covers. I would have said them in a different order. I would have said Sticky Fingers, Some Girls, and Exile on Main Street. Okay. And then I see Charlie Watts leaning over to Jagger and asking, what song Sticky Fingers?
He didn't know.
He had no idea. And Jagger explained it to him, it's the one with the zipper. It's the one that Andy did. Andy, of course, being Andy Warhol. And like, to me, that was just so amazing that every Stones fan would know Sticky Fingers.
Right.
But that somebody who's in the band, that has been in that band forever, would be so incredibly uninterested in anything but the drumming or the core music, that he would not be aware of that was amazing, because for many other people, including me, Sticky Fingers is one of the best covers of all time. Yeah.
How do you go about refining your visual palette and sense of taste?
You're doing more and you're seeing more. I think our taste, including our view on beauty, depends very much on how much we've seen already.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously then the context we've seen it and how we feel when we're seeing it. But that's also a big problem between an audience, let's say an audience, a curator, and a critic. Because an audience, by definition, will have seen much less than the critic. So their tastes can be very, very different. And it becomes a huge problem when it becomes to, let's say, public art, which by definition, because it's called public art, should be for the public.
Yeah.
Critics hate public art. If you listen to Jerry Zolls, he's saying like 99.9% of all public art is crap. Yeah, from a critic point of view, that's very much likely true, because you've seen so much that everything to you looks lame. But if you're working 9 to 5 and you take the subway and you see some mural on the subway wall, you probably want it to be pretty. You definitely have a very, very different point of view of that mural wall than if you are thinking and dealing with art 16 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, it's almost irrelevant what the critic thinks about public art, because it really is for the public. And I think I'm thinking that way because I'm coming from design, and in design, it is paramount. It's in the center of the profession that you take the public seriously.
Of course.
While in art, it's very different. I've talked to many artists who couldn't give a shit about the public, which becomes difficult and sometimes odd if you then exhibit, let's say, in a very popular museum like MoMA, where you have a gigantic percentage of the audience being tourists that might visit a museum every 3 years and goes into that place kind of not understanding anything. And ultimately having, well, at least they can see, Starry Sky by Van Gogh or, a couple of others. So they probably get at least a little bit of a feel. But there is an odd thing going on where you have a significant percentage of the audience not being talked to, not being communicated.
Well, what comes to mind, this is a slight diversion from what you're saying, but what came to mind is where things can frankly be over-intellectualized to the point where the intellect can see something as good that is actually the opposite of maybe what your intuitive sense thinks is really good. We were joking at dinner the other night that the ugliest building on many college campuses is the architecture building. And if you look at the preferences that architects have versus the preferences of ordinary people, they're exactly the opposite, And you see the same thing we were talking about bad writing earlier. You see the same thing where in order to fit into some club, people will spice up, fluff up their writing in some sort of fancy schmancy way. But no, people don't want that. And because of that, I think it's important to have some sort of hall of heroes in your head of people who are popular and good.
I think that's also by far the hardest thing to do.
Popular and good.
Yeah. Like if you can make a film, if you can write a book, if you can do anything that is really good, but it actually talks to a mass audience, that's my highest.
I
That's
agree.
the highest bar. That's by far the most difficult thing to do. And there's people out there who think that you're selling out when you do that. But no, I think that, and there's examples in all of that. I mean, there's examples in books, there's examples in movies that actually were able to achieve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's totally people who do sell out in order to reach the mass market.
Oh, for sure.
But the problem is, if you think that everyone who's successful is just a sellout, then what does that mean? If you become successful, are you going to be like, well, I sold out? No. That's not the way it always works. And I think that a lot of this just comes down to people over-intellectualizing, especially architects, especially writers. Oh, my goodness.
I mean, you have that same gap that we just talked about, that if you're an architect, specifically if you're a good architect, you're breathing this 16 hours a day. And of course, your taste, what you feel is beautiful, is very different from somebody who doesn't think about architecture at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was a case, maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago, where you had 10 experts or a dozen experts in the New York Times electing their, whatever it was, 20 or 50 favorite buildings. Oh my God, you should have seen the comments afterwards. It was like, everybody was like, you guys are nuts. This is all shit. This is terrible. And it was very odd because the majority of these buildings were important boxes. It was all rectangular, boxy, by the Bauhausy buildings. Of course, many of them early, many of them were quite new when they were done, but the audience did not appreciate that at all. And I'd say it was there was almost no living architect among them. I also felt it was kind of pissy, like nobody wanted to have a colleague on the list. It was safer to have the dead people on there. It was not I also didn't. I know more about architecture than I guess the usual commenter in the New York Times, but I also thought it was a little bit unfortunate.
Tell me more about that process of refining taste. You were talking about consuming a lot and basically having a broad palette, but what else have you done?
When it comes to a taste of beauty, I think a lot of it is just the desire to make it beautiful. But I would say between the 1950s and the year 2000, roughly, there was a concentration on functionalism that completely left beauty aside. When I studied, which was in the 80s in art school, you couldn't mention beauty. You would be laughed out of the classroom. You were thought of as either conservative or surface related or maybe totally commercial, like in the beauty industry, or possibly a Nazi.
Wow.
In any case, if you talked about beauty in the 80s in my art school, you were not considered a serious person, because it was not something that a serious person would waste their time on. And so there was no thought given to making it beautiful. It was just not something that was in the air, definitely not in design, but also in architecture, definitely in art. It was a term non grata for sure. And I think we are in the process now, definitely, of that changing. Where very fantastic architects like Herzog and Demeron, or a good number of others, top architects, very openly talk about the need and the desire for beauty.
What I took from that is this. When you did your beauty show, the main sentence was basically this: beauty is a combination of shape, form, color, composition, material, and texture to please the aesthetic senses, especially the sight. And what I took from that is part of what you're doing when you look at the world is you're looking at what is the shape of this, what is the form, what is the color, the composition, the material, and the texture. What are all those things, looking at every single part, and then asking, how do I elevate that? I think it was Enzo Ferrari was once asked, how did you make such a beautiful car? And he said something to the effect of, I just looked at a normal car, and at every single thing I saw, I asked, how do I make this thing better?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be exactly the same technique. I mean, would be, or the same sort of thinking. Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's that constant questioning. And I think that's a very important felt sense that one needs to have whenever they work on a project is when you have just tweaked 1,000 things to make them better, and it's the ensemble of all of those things that makes the feng shui or whatever it is perfect. You know what I mean? Or at least really of quality, because I think that what you don't get a sense of until you make something is that excellence is really just the byproduct of 10,000 things that are thought of consciously and tweaked and refined.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you just made a film, no? So that's that's at the very, I mean, this is like truer than almost anywhere else. Yeah, you have 10,000 things that need tweaking.
Yeah.
And
Maybe 100,000 in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I notice so many designers, so many creatives, they just end up getting in a rut where they become a parody of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's very, very much that. See, when I was very young, I only liked the changers, and I never liked the stay-the-samers. So I preferred the Beatles over the Stones. I preferred, I don't know, Andy Warhol over Roy Lichtenstein. Like I preferred David Bowie over Bob Dylan. You know, like you get the idea.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I think I appreciated some of the stay-the-samers also. I actually quite like the Bob Dylan stayed in a more narrow way because he could really go deeper there. Or very obvious to me is James Perell. Yeah. So, I mean, he basically not only stayed the same, but he's doing some ideas over and over again, like his skyscape, you know, the space with the square or oval or round hole in the ceiling. I mean, he's done dozens of them, and they become better and better and better. Like to the point where I now look, if a museum has a sky space, I look at the date. If it's too old, I'm not even go and see it because the new ones are so much better than the old ones. And I'm so glad that he stuck with it, that he was willing as a person to just make it 2%, 5% better every single time he does a new one.
Yeah. I always think of Japanese craftsmanship. That's what's just remarkable about the Japanese is their persistence. After 40 years of making knives, we're going to do another decade, then another decade, and another decade. And it's just refining that practice. Same thing with sushi over and over and over.
I mean, you see it in those Edo temples that are basically where the whole idea is that it's been rebuilt every 20 years so that every generation can learn how to rebuild it. And if there's Edo temples, I mean, it's whatever, 800 years old, but it's, of course, it was rebuilt, whatever, dozens and dozens of times. Mm-hmm. And the whole design idea is that it's being redone all the time. And they're planting the trees to rebuild it in 40 years from now and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Wow. Let's talk about the relationship between beauty and function, because a lot of people see them as kind of opposites, but you have strongly rejected that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, beauty is, of course, a function in itself. Beauty makes things work much better. That actually was what brought us in the studio to beauty, because we noticed that whenever we did a project that where we took the form very seriously, that project seemed to work much better. And when I looked into it, that really became clear. And I mean, there's so many.
What are examples of that?
Well, one I think I have right here is a bag. I've had this bag for, this bag is a new bag. But I've just had that remade in Mexico. But I've had basically the same bag. I've bought the same bag 35 years ago, and I've had it for 35 years. Wow. And I had it for 35 years. It was repaired maybe every 5 years because I liked it. It doesn't really matter if other people think, many people think it's beautiful, but probably not everybody. But I thought it was beautiful, which meant that I had it repaired all the time, which made this much, 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 much more sustainably proper than, those jute bags or those cotton bags that you get under the guise of sustainability. And meaning, of course, my favorite example would be the Pantheon in Rome, the longest all the time having been used building in the world, 2,000 years old, never was broken down because every culture that occupied it thought it was beautiful and didn't want to get rid of it. That, of course, is the single most sustainable building in the world, much more sustainable than any bamboo hut or any of those places that we now think of as being sustainable.
It's crazy to me that the sustainability movement hasn't co-opted beauty as their friend.
Very, very odd. Where so much of the sustainability world, meaning those ugly solar panels on houses very often, but you not so much see that here, but we see it a lot in Central Europe, where houses have been, have some added isolation that is just really dreadful. And all of this stuff can be made. I, of course, am a big friend of solar panels, but you need to create them with beauty in mind, and you have to install them with beauty in mind. And then it will be fantastic. I am sure that if you installed solar panels gorgeously on your roof, when it comes to resale value, that will reflect in that resale value. Yeah. If that whole thing is beautiful.
And the sun will be so excited to be next to the solar panels that more rays will come to you.
Sun is our friend, for sure.
All the rays will be running there. I want to go through some of the lessons that you shared in your book, and I just want to get your quick take on why you've chosen these. The first one is that everyone who is honest is interesting.
Well, that actually was not even my lesson. That was came from a guy called Quentin Crisp, who came to visit my students, and he told the students that he used to say everybody's interesting, and then journalists said, "Well, you're wrong. Like people are so many are so boring." And then he said, "Well, everybody who is honest is interesting," and that hit me like a lightning bolt. Wow. Because as a designer, obviously as a writer, you want to be interesting. Yeah, meaning that's the core of it. And I thought, wow, this is so fantastic. All you have to do is being honest. It will be automatically interesting. It's in many ways, it's easier to be honest than to sit down and needing to have a great idea. Yeah. But the honesty is, of course, is also true in writing. Obviously, I mean, we feel it. I spent a good amount of time at conferences speaking, and I hear other speakers. You feel it in a second.
In a second.
If the person who speaks is not honest about it, if it's just, whatever cliche, or if it's something that he picked up, or if it doesn't come from the heart, the audience knows immediately.
Immediately. Yeah. My friend, Jeremy, has a great line. He says, the solution to writer's block is just to be more honest. And I think that that's very often the case, that a lot of times when people don't know what to say, don't know what to create, they're not actually tapping into what they believe to be true. There's like a social filter. Either they have the filter of, what am I supposed to say? Or if I say this, somebody else won't like me. Yeah. And so the lack of honesty just becomes like muck in the water stream, and the water just can't move.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Next one. If I want to explore a new direction professionally, it is helpful to try it out for myself first.
Trying experimenting for myself lowers the hurdles because I can find my sea feet while the stakes are very low.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more free to try this, try that, because if nothing comes out at the end of the day, I might be a bit frustrated, but okay, so what? Yeah, I think it's sort of like a way to get me through times when my level of guts are not so high. Just to experiment for myself. And then if something worked, then it's much easier to do it on the bigger stage. And on the 100%.
Well, that seems to be a huge theme for your career and how you structure life is to make room for experimentation. I have never met someone who, like you, consciously said, I'm going to do a full year on sabbatical every 7 years.
It's turned out to be a very good decision.
This was the year 2000?
The year 2000.
No, it was 99, I think it was, because it was the dot-com boom.
Exactly, yeah. It was dot-com boom. Everybody made a lot of money. It felt very unprofessional to close the studio now that it was running, now that it was finally happening. We had good clients. And yeah, that was scary for me. And in the year, I literally did not produce anything. I just did ideas. So at the end of the year, I had a full sketchbook. I had a large sketchbook. It was filled with stuff. I had a more carefully written diary because I had more time.
Yeah.
The diary was longer, much more often, was probably, I could get into thoughts deeper a little.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, I was happy to go back into a more regular studio environment. And ultimately, this whole series of things I've learned in my life so far that became exhibitions and books came out of that because that was part of the diary of that year. And then the second sabbatical was super easy. Meaning that the first one had so clearly a big impact on the studio, and not just on the quality of the work of the studio, but also of how I felt in the studio, because I could get rid of, in the first 7 years that when it was super busy, I had all sorts of thought of, oh my God, I would love to do this if I would only have the time. And some of that stuff I really loved to do when I had the time. Some of that stuff I was delusional. I didn't want to do that at all.
Oh, wow.
Including, for example, reading, which was a huge surprise to me. I always thought, my God, if I would only have more time, I would read so much more.
No.
Didn't at all. Like, I'm just coming back from a sabbatical. We were first 4 months in Madrid and then in Mexico, in Guadalajara. And I probably read 20, 25 books, which is what I read in the busy normal times. So that didn't increase whatsoever, but many other things, of course, I did have time for. Well,
it seems like what you do is you set up a hierarchy of what you want to learn. When you go on sabbatical, you say, I want to learn this, this, this. And then you basically block out your Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and you say, I'm going to have time for this, I'm going to have time for this, I'm going to have time for this. And my understanding is you did not do that the first time. The first time it didn't work super well. So you're like, all right, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. Okay, if I can do this, then the sabbatical will be good.
Yeah. First time I thought I should have no plan whatsoever. And that didn't work out. I was just busy and frustrated that I didn't really create anything. And so I needed the plan. But also by now I know that I need the plan literally only for maybe the first 2 or 3 months to really get it going. And by month 3, I have so many projects running that I don't need to have any plan anymore. Right. Then they're just running. Yeah.
Tell me about this one. Trying to look good limits my life.
Well, that harks back to this, I think it's also, there's a relative in there with the honesty, where this idea that I always have to look the way that people will like me.
Yeah.
There's do things that are likable. That is a limitation. That and I definitely had. That's a problem that I think that I probably have more so than other people.
Me too.
Like, I definitely want to be liked.
Me too.
Definitely.
To a fault.
Yeah. And I think my life would be richer without having to necessarily make other people's life poorer, if I would sometimes care less about being liked.
Yeah, I'm always catch myself daydreaming about, if I do this thing, then this person will approve, think highly of me. I'm like, dude, what? Like, are you really going to make that the telos of your life? And all the things that it blocks me from doing and saying and standing up for.
Yeah.
Not proud of it. Obsessions make my life worse and my work better.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm already an obsessive personality, as in, meaning I fall easily for addictions. I had to stop drinking alcohol. I had definitely to stop smoking.
Cigarettes?
I would over them. First cigarettes, and then for a while in sabbaticals, I said, well, it's sabbatical. I'm allowed to smoke cigars. Yeah. That was still not in this sabbatical, but that was still the case in the sabbatical 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And first day, 2 cigars. Second day, 12.
You did 12 cigars in a day?
Yeah. And and at the end of the sabbatical, I was inhaling them. So very clearly unsupportable, unsustainable. And of course I had to stop. But in the professional life, in work, it's of course extremely helpful, because if you're obsessive about a certain piece and you obsessively try to make it better, try to make it more beautiful, try to push it to the point where you can't push it anymore, where you think, okay, this is right now my level of pushification. Like, this is where I can go. I don't know now where to go. I think that if you can go there, that often is a good piece.
Man, I love that word, pushification. That is such a good word. I know exactly what you mean by that. So this is my interpretation of what you're saying. When you're at a certain point in your life, there's a limit of talent and pace that you have. And when you do work that you're proud of, you've pushed to that limit. Yeah. It's not the best that you can do over the course of your life. What ends up happening, which is great, is you look back at where you had pushified in the past, be like, dude, I could have done so much better. But in every moment, I think that the goal of whatever project you're working on is to pushify as much as you can. And I love that word, which I think you've completely made up, because it implies a level of progress over time while also giving yourself some grace to say, at that moment in time, that was as good as I could do, while also giving yourself some motivation to really pushify to the utter horizon of what you're capable of.
And that's really all you can do. There might, of course, be at the same time other people who could push much further.
100%.
Totally possible. And if I push to the point where I can't anymore, or I'm lost, like, okay, I think this is where I am right now, there's always other people who like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that I'm enough within the mainstream that this sort of relatability is there.
How much, when you're designing, when you're writing, do you think about you yourself as the creator? I'm going to focus on my taste versus the taste, the wishes, the desires, the consumer, the audience.
It depends. There's, let's say, when we did album covers,
mm-hmm.
I found it my responsibility to serve the world of that band.
Mm.
So I would say, if I did a cover for Lou Reed, and the Lou Reed fan base thinks this is a shit cover,
You failed.
yeah. Even if I felt it was a very good cover.
Yeah.
Because I do think that within the world of design, there has to be that sort of functionality. We haven't done any commercial work in years. And so a lot of the stuff that we're doing now is design, but it's distributed in museums, in galleries. There is sort of a client because the gallery or the museum, they sometimes have a say or they sometimes have a thing, but of course it's not a commercial client and it's much wider. And there I feel it's also like it runs under my name, like it says on the museum wall, Stefan Sagmeister. Now it says the exhibition that we are running right now is called Finally Something Good. And like when we create a piece, I'm not thinking to serving a community necessarily.
Yeah.
But I still want, and this is why it's design and not art, I still see the exhibition has to have a functionality, as in I want the people to have a different view of the world after the exhibition than they had before the exhibition.
What do you make of the homogeneity that has infected the design world? You talk about a font where you can tell if something's a Swiss typeface or a Norwegian typeface. A poster, you can tell if something's a French poster or an Italian poster going back. But now there's this homogeneity. My first question is, do you think that will continue? And second of all, how do you break from that?
Well, war is a good place.
Let's go to war, baby.
Well, I can tell you, we had 2 exhibitions in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And nowhere else have I seen so much designs rooted in their own history.
Huh.
Because they are attacked.
Oh, interesting. So it's like the tree goes deeper into its roots once there's heavy winds.
They are in danger of losing their identity because if they would become part of Russia, of course, it would all be Russian.
Yep.
Obviously, they would even forbid the language. It would all be like the whole country has to speak Russian. Meaning the Russians did that already, of course, when they took Ukraine after World War II. They already got rid of the intellectuals, had everybody speak Russian, but of course that will return. And so there is an incredible amount of new publishers that only publish in Ukrainian. There is an incredible amount of designy stores where everything it's contemporary, but everything has Ukrainian roots, Ukrainian stories, Ukrainian patterns.
Wow.
It's done it very, very well. But if we go back to the whole world, I 100% agree with you, and I think it's a huge problem. And I think that's one of the there's some real fantastic advantages that came through globalization.
Yeah.
Meaning lifted so many people worldwide out of poverty. Incredible. And one of the real downsides is the same-ification of the world. That you cannot tell in most cases what was done in London or in Helsinki or in in Johannesburg.
Right. So as you think of breaking out of this same-ification of the world, because man, it really is bad in the world of design, because it's not just the aesthetic same-ification, but it's the templification of design. And you can just see it all the time. Working with designers drives me nuts because there is so much generic stuff that is thrown at me, and even the innovative stuff is generic. Do you know what I mean?
Even the stupidity is everywhere. Meaning, like, what happened to bathroom doors? Like, to shower doors? It's like every hotel you go to now, there's no more door on the shower. I recently talked to an architect about it. What the fuck? Why do you guys hate shower doors? And he said, because they don't look good on drawings.
Yeah.
because on the drawing you have all these things then there, and the drawing just looks so much cleaner without the door there. It's like, it's that stupid. It's literally that stupid. But for a while, for a second, I thought that the design hotel might be, I had some hopes in the design hotel, because of course, one of the same-ifications were the chain hotels, that the Hilton or whatever it is, or the Radisson needed to look the same everywhere, because some people want to have exactly the same wherever they go. But it turned out that the design hotel, with some exceptions, but they look the same everywhere else. Maybe it has like a little material gimmick, that the box that you go into in Kuala Lumpur has some bamboo outside, but it's the same shit box that you also go into in Frankfurt, where it's made out of stone. Architects and designers seem to have to think the same way pretty much anywhere. And specifically in an easy thing like a hotel, where you can be really outrageous, because even if you would get sick of it for 3 days, it would be fun to be in a space that is completely different and totally local and completely of that time. And that doesn't mean that you have to go nostalgic or anyway, but wouldn't it be great to be in Saigon and be in a room that's totally Saigon? Like complete, like real Saigon, like including what that means politically, what that means historically, what that means to live in Saigon right now. Get the real taste of that.
Yeah.
As opposed to be in the same modernist thing and have the little stupid coffee shop downstairs that serves the same latte that I can get here on 23rd Street.
Yeah, same neon sign and all that nonsense.
Yeah. But first coffee sign on the
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
The entire conversation, I've been thinking of this quote from Heinrich Heine. So he goes to Amen's Cathedral and he looks at this majestic cathedral and he says, people in those old times had convictions. We moderns only have opinions, and it needs more than a mere opinion to build a Gothic cathedral. I want to end here, which is one of the coolest things that you do is that you grade yourself at the beginning of years. And then you pick a number of things that you want to improve, and then you give yourself a weekly rating on how you're doing. Tell me about that.
Well, it's, I was born 3 miles from the German border, so I'm a list maker. And when we did the Happy Film, oh my God, I had like 8 lists running like this. All sorts of tests of how I felt, what this makes me feel, and blah, blah, blah. But I still do this. I think Benjamin Franklin had a very tight version of that list.
That tracks. That's the kind of thing you would do.
Yeah. I used to do, good intentions in the beginning of the year. And then, of course, by January 5th, they're kind of gone. So I feel I need a reminder of what I want to do in my life, how I want to behave, what I want to be. And weekly turned out to be well for me. I was actually in Mexico right now. There was a woman who I admire who had an app that did it daily. And I switched for 3 months or so to her app. And it was too much for me. It was too, I don't know, and then I did it too sloppily. It was just it was bothersome.
Yeah.
Weekly works. Weekly is fine. It takes me no time at all. I have a reminder in my, now of course, electronic calendar that I have to do the diary. I write the diary every Saturday morning. It comes up on my to-do list automatically.
Okay.
So I do the diary and I do my list.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, sometimes I have one thing that I get terrible marks for weeks. So it's not like that I really then have to, but it's still a good reminder that no, that's what I thought I shouldn't do.
Yeah. All right, I have one more question. Out of all the buildings you've interacted with, designs you've seen, what is the one that has moved you the most that you recommend that we should engage with?
Buildings or
Buildings, artistic projects. What is something that just really moved you?
oh my God, there's so much.
You gotta pick one.
There's so well, so the one that's just maybe it resonates because we just talked about him. But I would say the Skyscape by James Perell. Or if you can pick a new one, you said you're from Texas.
Yeah, there's one at University of Austin.
There's Rice at Rice University.
Oh, there's another one?
There's a big one at Rice in Houston.
Yeah,
All right.
Houston.
So yeah, there's a fantastic one at Rice.
Really?
Yeah. Basically, it's a space. It's a room with a hole in the ceiling. But the way the hole in the ceiling is designed is so that it's super, super thin at the edges, so you can't really see it. So when you look up, you kind of, let's say if it's a blue sky, you just see a blue space there. But the skyscapes are by far the best at sunrise and at sundown.
By far.
Even though you don't see the sunrise and the sundown because you're looking straight up into the sky, you see the subtle differences in the sky, in the color. And those subtle differences as it changes are so gorgeous. And there's such a beauty in there that it's like, I just had goosebumps talking about it. Yeah. So it's, and for example, if you're at Rice or at any of the many other skyscapes and you stay long and it's basically already night, it never really goes black. It just goes into an extremely dark, dark, dark blue. But it's the darkest blue you'll ever see because it's not, you couldn't print it, you couldn't weave it, you couldn't dye it because it's the fucking universe.
Yeah.
It's that makes that blue, and that there is a gorgeousness and a beauty in that blue that, well, for lack of a better explanation, you have to see to believe. It's really something. There's really something.
Well, the thing that the Skyscape did for me is it made me appreciate the way that colors are complementary, and then whatever the opposite of complementary is, that they, when you see two colors together, it actually changes both of the colors. And as you watch a skyscape, you'll have a few moments where maybe you'll watch the way that orange engages with blue or pink engages with blue, and you'll just see, oh my goodness. And there's something, psychedelic isn't the right word, but there is something that is extra sensory or something about a skyscape where you're so attuned to the relationships between color and form like you never are otherwise in your life.
And I think it puts everybody immediately into quiet mood. Talk about how beauty changes our behavior. I mean, there's a skyscape in Lech, in a place in Austria, where we go skiing, and you can ski up to it. So people come with their boots on, and they go in there and they look up and they sit down. And even though they're in their ski outfits and they have ski boots which are noisy when they come in and stuff, it's clear there's no sign, don't talk, don't run, nothing. And it's completely clear it totally demands that sort of behavior. And it's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, that was
Thanks
good
a lot.
fun. Thanks for coming on.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Excellent.